Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
So you're going to do it. Tell him, he said. I have to, Brandon. He deserves that much and it's little enough. We both know that, she said. Haley, it's going to kill him more. It's going to kill our relationship with him in all its forms. He will never speak to either of us again ever, he said. You don't give him enough credit, Brandon. He'll understand if the tables were reversed, she started. Your kid and yourself, Haley, he loves you more than his life, same as I do. Breaking up with him after so many years together, it's going to kill him, he said. I have to risk it. I have to. I will be as gentle as I possibly can. I will let him know that both of us love him to death, but that she started to tear up. He reached over the table and took her hand in his. But that we have been cheating on him for almost a year. Haley, I doubt you could even imagine a way to be gentle enough in breaking something like that to him. I guess you've got to try, but it's still going to be really bad for him. Haley, are you sure you don't want me to go with you? You need me there, my love. I feel it, I do, he said. No, Brandon. This is between my husband and me. I have to own up to my sins and be as straight and gentle as I possibly can. That's the best I can do. I'm just hoping that in time he will understand and we will all be able to get by it. Jesus, Brandon, this is going to be hard, she said. Yeah, I know, he said. I sat across from her and stared. 15 years. 15 years we'd been married. And now it was over. All through medical school. All through residency. Careers well underway. We'd come up together, she and I. We'd made it, she a top gynecologist. Me a respected cardio specialist. 39 years old. And now it was over. Hell of a thing. I'm sorry, Lucas. It just happened. Brandon and I, we fell in love. I wish there was something I could say, something I could do, she said. I just shook my head slowly from side to side. Emily, I can't believe this. You're killing me, us. I mean, my best friend. My ex-best friend now, I guess. You've thought this over? You've thought this out? I said. 15 years, Haley. 15 years. He's still your best friend, Lucas. He's as sick about this as I am. He wanted to be here with me, but I talked him out of it. It's just something that neither he nor I could help. It just happened, she said. And yes, I have thought it over. I've agonized over it. I still love you, Lucas. We both do, but just not enough. Is that it? I said. Lucas, forget it. Haley, I guess we're done. We're done. You won't be seeing me again after today. Not ever, I said. I was bitter. Bitter as hell. I got up and walked out. The hospital cafeteria walls were stifling. She didn't follow me or say anything more. There was nothing left to say. I left the building and just walked. I walked for a long time. In the end, I was back to where I had started walking. Back at St. Jude Medical. ID thought it out, sort of. Walking was good for thinking. Always had been. There were a few things I needed to collect before I left. And I was leaving. I headed for my office. I heard a voice from behind me call my name as I strode down the corridor. Dr. Morgan. Dr. Morgan, sir. She said. I turned toward the nurse and just looked at her, waiting for her to say something meaningful. Sir, Dr. Brandon, Dr. Carter asked me to have you call him, sir, she said. I just turned away and continued toward my office. I had to get out of there. But I needed my papers. My passport. There were a few other things, too. Stuff tucked away in what had been my inner sanctum for so long. Stuff I needed. Haley and I were done. I couldn't bring myself to think it, but the reality was there regardless. It was what it was. I packed everything of importance in my gym bag. It was kind of amazing how little there was that could be considered important when one's purpose in life had gone the way of all flesh. Nurses had their place, I mused. I changed out of the scrubs I was still in and into my jeans and leather jacket. Wherever I landed, I would buy what I needed. The major constant was the fact that I couldn't stay around Seattle anymore. A place where every little thing would remind me of her. Of us. I had to get out. No plans. No trunks of clothes and possessions. She could have it all. She could give it all to Brandon. My used-to-be best friend. Best friend? Not anymore. Now my worst enemy. My hatred for good old Brandon would never die. That was going to be another constant. The eternal constant. I took one last look around. I turned to close the door behind me. As I turned back to head out, I bumped into him. Lucas, I just wanted to say how he started. But my fist in his mouth cut him off. Screw you, old bud, I said. He lay on the floor, bleeding. Funny, but I didn't feel a bit good about it. I didn't feel bad either. I guess when it came down to it, I didn't feel anything. My life was over. In medicine, I decided. My life at St. Jude was over. I was out of there for good. I wondered how it would all play out the next day when I didn't show up for rounds. I'd call Dr. Sanders and let him know, of course. He'd go nuts. Admin types always went nuts when things didn't go according to plan. I smiled in spite of myself. The scene I imagined playing out in my mind amused me. I was one of the best cardiac physicians in the state. Brandon was a plastic surgeon. Useless in any practical sense, I told myself. Nurse Goodman stood still as a statue, her mouth hanging wide open. She looked at the fallen and then at me. "It's okay, Helen. He'll feel a lot better tomorrow." "Whereas I won't," I said. I strode out and into the night. I had separate accounts from those of my wife. My ATM card would carry me until I could disappear and start over. I was still married, of course. Kind of a problem, but I figured more of one for her than me. She was the one who wanted to be with someone else. I assumed she'd marry him. But to do that, she'd have to divorce me. She could well do the paperwork. I drove. Day and night I drove, stopping only to piss, get gas, and coffee. I hadn't slept for almost 24 hours. Finally, when I'd almost killed myself, just barely missing a concrete construction barrier, I pulled off the freeway and parked under an overpass. I had no idea where I was. The sun was my alarm clock. I felt stiff and sore all over. I rolled down the car windows. There was just something restorative about morning air. I took a deep breath. I didn't feel quite as bad as I had just a day earlier. Looking around and assessing my current geography, I could see what looked like a restaurant maybe a quarter-mile up the street. I pulled out and up to it, parking. I got out, locked up, and made my way inside. It was a typical greasy spoon, but I was hungry, and I needed coffee in the worst way. A good-looking, youngish waitress in a uniform that I judged to be too small for her stood looking at me, waiting for me to say something. "Coffee. Black. And soon," I said. "And dry toast. And eggs. How do you want the eggs?" She said. "Just scramble 'em," I said. She meandered her way between the tables and out of sight. I sagged back in the booth. Hell, now I was feeling as bad as I was yesterday. I guess the effects of the fresh morning air had worn off. A busboy passed and I called him over. "Where are we?" I said. "What is this town?" "Clayton," said the boy. "Clayton, New Mexico." "Thanks," I said. "Damn. Near 1,400 miles, I reckoned. I'd heard of Clayton before. Knew where it was on the map. Billy the Kid and all of those guys had hung around here, or so the legends claimed. Santa Fe was not too far away, as I recalled. Never having been to New Mexico, I was intrigued. What the hell? It was better than being back in Seattle. The waitress appeared with my food. "Any place to sack out around here?" I said. "Around the corner. There's a motel," she said. "It's cheap enough if it matters." I nodded my thanks. I watched her as she made the rounds of the tables. A good-looking woman, for sure, I determined. I headed for the Roundup Motel and Bar and Grill. She dabbed at his mouth with the dampened cloth. "I can't say as I blame him," he said. She nodded. "Brandon, he hates us," she said. "I know it." "Yeah, I guess he does," he said, taking the cloth from her hand. "Dr. Carter, the officers are here," said the nurse. She'd had to push her way through the small crowd of rubbernecking medical staff to deliver her message. The group began to disperse with the arrival of the uniforms. "Thanks, Helen," he said. "Send them in." The interview was short. The men in blue didn't look too pleased, but the offense was too trivial for all of the paperwork it would have entailed. So maybe there was an upside to dealing with uncooperative victims. "I'm glad you didn't press charges, Brandon," she said. "We've done enough to him. I just hope someday he'll get over it and we can all talk about it, you know?" She said, not finishing. "And be friends?" "Not hardly. But you're right about us having done enough to him. You still going to try and see him tomorrow?" He said. "Yes. He has to come in to get the rest of his stuff. And then there's all of the stuff at the house. I know he doesn't want to talk to me, but maybe I can think of something between now and then," she said. "Haley, he may not come back for his stuff. At least not soon. You didn't see the look on his face when he left. He wasn't angry exactly. It was something else. Something worse," he said. "What?" she said. "Despair," he said. "Jesus. This is just wrong. It shouldn't have had to end this way. You him. It's crazy. Just crazy," she said. "He loves you. He loves you like I do. There's no gainsaying that fact," he said. She leaned in and laid her head on his chest. I've got to make this right with him somehow, Brandon. If not now, then sometime in the future. When he's had a chance to get used to the idea. I've just got to, she said. Yeah, I know. Me too, he said. How's your lip feel? She said. He started to laugh, but a grimace short-shanked that. Not the best. He really nailed me. I think one of my teeth is loose, too. I'll take care of it tomorrow, he said. She nodded. Come home with me tonight, he said. Okay. I don't want to be alone. So okay, she said. You look great, he said, admiring her dark, fluffed-out hair and the way her matching blouse and midi skirt complemented each other. You really do, she smiled. Maybe you'll just have to see for yourself, she teased. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her. I love you, Haley. Tonight is just for us, he said, his hands gliding down her arms. She leaned in, the warmth between them undeniable. As much as I admire what you're wearing, he murmured. I think I'd rather. Gently, he reached for the button on her skirt, letting it slip to the floor. He looked at her, sensing her willingness as she stood before him. He placed a hand on her back, his touch lingering before pulling her into his embrace. She sighed, lost in the moment, her thoughts distant and scattered as the night stretched on. Neither would find much rest. Only movement, intensity, and an unspoken understanding between them. For now, thoughts of her husband were buried deep in the back of her mind. They would return. And when they did, they would demand attention. But not tonight. Tonight, she was here. And so was he. And that was all that mattered. I had money. But I needed a job. Any job. If I was going to make this little burg my new place of residence. Hell, why not stay here? It really was as good as any other place. I wasn't feeling good. Not good at all. But I had things I had to get done even before launching my hunt for a job. First order of business. I only had one change of clothes. I had some shopping to do. Then I'd go job hunting. The Roundup Motel was clean, and the little attached bar and grill was adequate to my purpose. I figured to be staying for a week or so at the least. In town, I had gotten what I needed, mainly clothes, by noon. Lunch was again at the Greasy Spoon. I began my job quest before I even got up from the table. The waitress, her of the too-tight uniform, studied me. Well, we have a job open here if you're desperate, she said. She pointed to the help wanted sign in the window. Really? I said. Yeah, we need a waiter. 2 guys quit last week. College boys. It's always that way, seasonal kind of, if you know what I mean, she said. Yeah, I do, I said. I worked at a pizza place when I hesitated. Kid. I didn't want to let anyone know I'd been to college. I don't know why I wanted to keep that a secret, but it seemed a good idea. I mean, a cardiac surgeon waiting tables in a dead-end town in New Mexico? No. My private life, my history was going to be mine to know, and everyone else's to not know. I noticed your car when you drove up yesterday, she said. An old one, right? It looks almost new, though. Yeah, it was my dad's. It's a '57 Ford Fairlane. Collector's item, really. Had it for years. I just take care of it and it just keeps on keeping on. They don't make 'em like that anymore. I sounded like a teenager bragging to his girlfriend. Yeah, I guess. Come on, she said. She led me into the back. She introduced me to the owner of the place. An older man, maybe 60, balding, rugged-looking. Rob hired me on the spot. $7 an hour. And tips. Kind of a come-down for me economically. But money wasn't my worry. Forgetting was my worry. I wondered if forgetting were even possible. I was betting not. Hey, I said to the waitress that had been my headhunter. What? Your name? She smirked. Melinda. Melinda Compton. Yours, she said. I hesitated. I decided to use my real name. Too many possible complications otherwise. Lucas. Lucas Morgan, I said. She nodded. I had a thought. I had to get a new driver's license. My old one identified me as a doctor. I'd be taking care of that kind of stuff fast. Like, in a hurry. I looked at her for the first time as a person. A woman. Mid-20s. Tall, maybe 5 feet 10 inches, and slim. Short, dark, fluffy hair. Looked like she'd had it tough. I guess I'd be finding out about that sooner or later if we were going to be working together. I hadn't lied about working at a pizza place when I was a kid. I'd started as a freshman college student. 19 years ago. The name of the place had been Gino's. The owner had a thing for Italian opera. I'd shoveled pizza for all 4 years of my undergrad. A year later, my first as a med student, I met Haley. We'd clicked. And been together ever since. Happy too. Until now. Haley was a looker. 5 feet 9 inches, slim, short light brown hair. In those days, her hair was long. Now, a little darker than in the old days. We'd screwed like bunnies from our second date. I couldn't get enough of her. And I was sure the feeling was mutual. We moved in together in our second year in med school. And got married as soon as we became residents. That marriage was 12 years ago. Supreme irony of ironies. My longtime friend from high school days, Brandon Carter, ended up shadowing me through med school. He decided to go for the bucks and do the plastic surgeon thing. I went into cardiac. Haley loved children. Gynecology was a natural field for her. We were just at the point, too. Career stable. Where we had even been talking about having children ourselves. When completely out of the blue, she dropped the bomb on me. I guess she decided to be having children with good old Brandon. At any rate, since beginning med school, the three of us had always been together. Brandon and his flavor-of-the-month girlfriend. And Haley and I. Well, those days were all just memories now. And very bad memories. At least for me. Odd how happy times can morph like that. I set my jaw. I'd survive this. I would. God damn it, I would. She was not nervous exactly. But not comfortable. Well, Haley, I guess you and Carter have cost me my top heart specialist, said Emil Sanders. Emil, it's personal. I'd rather not get into it if it's all the same to you, she said. I hear that Carter and your husband had a fight. Right in front of 20 people just down the hall. That makes it my business, Haley, he said. I run this place. And I can't be having my medical corps battling it out in front of the paying public. I'm sorry about that. Brandon was trying to talk to him. Well, I wasn't there, but I guess things kind of got out of control, she said. Yeah. Right? Anyway, I've already talked to Dr. Carter about it, he said, sagging back in his chair. Lucas called me too. She started at that. Alert for his next words. He quit. Over the phone. He's not coming back. Did he say where he was going? Said Haley. She was literally sitting on the edge of her seat. He noticed. If you cared so much about where he'd be going, maybe you should have thought a bit longer about having an affair, Haley, he said. But to answer your question, he just said far away. He really isn't coming back. Your loss is my loss, he said. Hell? She said, wringing her hands. Yes, that about sums it up. He said that I called you in here to tell you the same thing I told Brandon Carter. I do not expect to see a drop-off in attitude or workload because of this. I hope I'm clear. Losing Lucas is bad enough. This hospital is not going to become just another soap opera because Carter and you are getting it on, Emil said. There won't be any problem, Emil. I promise you that, she said. Yes, well, that does it then. Get on back to whatever you were doing, he said. He picked up some papers and shuffled them. The interview was over. She rose slowly and left. He wasn't coming back. She felt sick. I only broke one dish on my first day. I wondered if that was some kind of record. I was surprised at how tired I was too. It was 11 p.m. I popped into a threatening-to-collapse folding chair in the little break room at the back of the kitchen. I had thought about going to the little country western place across the road. Maybe having a beer to celebrate my first day on the new job. I stared at the change of clothes hanging on the rack on the opposite wall that I'd brought with me, so as not to have to go back to the motel short walk away that it was. But now I was rethinking going out. I really was awfully tired. Hey, mister, said Melinda. You up for a beer? I'm buying. I looked up at her and made up my mind. Sure, I guess, I said. Question, aren't you tired? I'm feeling damn near dead. You get used to it. I've discovered over the years that a cold one takes the edge off, she laughed. Okay then. Let me do a quick change and we'll go, I said. She nodded. I grabbed my stuff, stepped into the adjacent bathroom, and changed. The dusty spur wasn't as small as I had at first thought. Long bar. Large dance floor. A caged bandstand and maybe 30 tables. One thing for sure, I wasn't underdressed. The place was peopled mostly by real cowboys. A lot of them even this late at night. The uniform of the night was dirty, patched jeans and really dirty Stetsons or John Deere caps. My damn near new Levis and my well-ironed button-down typed me as the original drugstore cowboy. At least my New Mexico Aggies cap wasn't out of place. That, even surrounded as I certainly was by 100 Texas Tech supporters, or so it seemed. I was treated well. It was still Big 12 ball, after all. Mel, as I had taken to calling her, was hit on some. She shined the boys on politely but firmly. She wanted to talk. So, tell me about it, she said. You sure ain't no cowpuncher. I smiled. I looked out on the dance floor, wishing I was there rather than being interrogated. But then, it was going to happen at some point anyway. The interrogation. No, I'm a city boy. Worked lots of different things over the years. I mean, apart from my experience at the pizza place, I said. Just trying to get by since my dad died. You seem different somehow. I mean, than other people I've seen around here, she said. I shrugged. I know you're not from here, but there's something else. Never been married? She said. I should have expected the question, but I hadn't. My face, I knew, gave me away. I knew that because of the look on hers. I recovered well, I thought. Yeah. But it ended badly. Best friend and all of that, I said. She looked down and nodded. Me too, she said. We weren't married, but we were going to be. Until I caught him with Rhonda Willis. We were toast after that. She looked around. She spotted something. That's him. Over there. With the redhead. She's Rhonda, she said. I wondered at her. You don't mind being here? With him across the room? I said. Not anymore. Couldn't stand either one of them for the longest time. But I got over it, she said. We don't talk and pal around or anything anymore. But I can stand to be around him, as you phrase it. We talked. A long time. It was 1 a.m. before we pulled up stakes and headed back. She to her car at the restaurant. Me to my short walk to the motel. We hadn't danced. That would happen another time. But we had talked. Time will pass. As it always has passed. And life continues to go on. Likewise, as it always does. I got into the swing of things locally and was actually beginning to heal emotionally. I had been able to find a suitable and very inexpensive apartment not far from the restaurant. In my second week on the job, I had actually vetted the place pretty well before deciding. I did not want to give myself away by living above my apparent means. I didn't give myself away, that is. I still thought about Haley almost all of the time. But as time passed, the pain grew less. My anger dissipated, and my mind began to turn to getting on with my life. I did one thing that did not square with my new persona. Quietly, I had gotten myself licensed to practice medicine in New Mexico. I knew that Haley and Brandon could find me once I was licensed, but I was betting that they wouldn't bother. It had been almost a year since the scene at St. Jude Medical anyway. I was probably divorced, and they were probably together and married. The thought made me sad. Very sad. Melinda and I got on well. By getting on well, I mean we dated, and eventually spent many nights together in each other's arms. Were we in love? No, I didn't think so. But we needed each other. We were good for each other. There is just something therapeutic about a woman's body melding into one's. As tongues and hands explore each other, Melinda tasted good, and she made no demands, other than to be satisfied when I penetrated her. On those occasions, I went to what I considered extreme lengths to prove my capacity to satisfy. She too always took time to assure me of my more than adequate skills in that regard. We were happy. It was midway into our second year that I was forced out of the closet. I suppose I was in the closet, at least insofar as my being a medical professional. I got my license, and had more recently decided to practice surreptitiously somewhere, maybe once a month. I couldn't practice my specialty, of course. Too many rules for someone who was getting no time in the operating room. But I could, in an emergency, do general practitioner stuff. Okay. I ended up doing volunteer work once a month on a Navajo reservation. I figured my identity would not be compromised by that. Some might wonder why I didn't just go back to doctoring full-time. And forget the masquerade. The truth is, I wasn't sure why. I just knew that my old career had no allure for me anymore. Maybe because of the memories it conjured. About Haley and me. In her old life. I just knew I had to do things the simple way. A different way. Still, I wasn't stupid. Ergo, my decision to work with the Navajo Nation. The Dusty Spur was nothing if not wild, boisterous, and sometimes dangerous. We'd been hearing the band. And the dancers. And having a gay old time. Right along with the rest of the crowd. I happened to look at the large clock on the back wall. It was 10:17 p.m. When my world was literally turned upside down. The lead singer and piano man had been going nuts up on the stage. When a cowboy, angry at something going on at his table, threw a saucer as hard as he could at somebody across from him. The guy ducked. The saucer sliced frisbee-like through the air, seeming to gain speed with distance. It knifed dead center into the singer's throat. It dropped him where he stood. He lay writhing on the floor. I knew right then that his larynx had been crushed. I had no choice. I flew at the stage, unsheathing a knife from the side of a half-drunk patron. I knelt at the side of the fallen entertainer. I looked around, saw what I needed, and screamed at the girl a few feet away to give them to me. I had no time for the niceties of sterilization. I performed the tracheotomy on the spot, inserting the straws in the aperture wrought by the patron's knife. For minutes later, the EMTs arrived, immobilized the man, and carted him off on their gurney. The whole incident consumed but 5 minutes, including the time it took the EMT guys to arrive. The guy would live, I knew, but at the expense of my subterfuge. Any hope I had of remaining in the background was lost. Lost because of a slim, 40-ish man slipping out the door immediately behind the ambulance crew. The local news rag would be putting out an extra in less than a dozen hours, complete with pictures. I was toast. Melinda was the first to confront me. "Well," she said. I felt like a little boy about to get a serious spanking. "Yeah, okay, so there was more to my story, my job history, than I let on. I had my reasons," I said. She seemed to deflate. She shook her head slowly. "Lucas, I just don't know about you," she said. "Well, anyway, at least Slim will have a chance to raise that new baby his wife is carrying around in her belly. Were you a nurse or something? In the army, maybe?" she said. I looked down. "No," I said. "A doctor." "What? And you're working here? I mean, at the restaurant?" she said. "I like working here," I said. I did too. Like I said, "Mel, I have my reasons." "Your ex?" she said. "Yeah. You could say that," I said. She nodded. I stood there watching the two of them, wondering how I could have been so stupid. Clearly, trading in Lucas for Dr. Brandon Carter was not the best idea I'd ever had. A good man for a player. And Brandon was a player. Thing is, I knew it before I ever broke with my husband. Brandon had always been a player. But I thought I could change him. I had deluded myself. Hard for me to be critical of Brandon, though. The hypocrisy of such was more than clear to me. I cheated on Lucas with Brandon. So what gave me the right to complain about Brandon cheating on me? Answer: I had no such right. I cleared my throat noisily. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything too important, but I need to get my clothes packed so I can get out and get the divorce underway," I said. "Haley, what?" stuttered Brandon. I smiled. I was proud of myself for the control I was displaying. "What are you doing here?" "Well, Brandon, I live here, for one. And I came home early to get a change of clothes because I'm doing a double tonight. But don't let me interrupt you and Nurse Helen. Please. Continue," I said. They were already scrambling to get their clothes together. Nurse Helen was mumbling her apologies. I could get her fired, and she knew it. I wouldn't bother, though. Brandon was the main cog in this little vignette. I pulled a couple of suitcases down and started dumping things into them as the need struck me. Brandon, for his part, was babbling. He was really out of control emotionally. I got the feeling that he really didn't want me to go. Really didn't want me to go. "Haley, it was nothing. We just fell into it," he started. "Please, don't leave. We can get past this. Just let me explain." "I beg you," he said. I stopped what I was doing and stared at him. "Brandon, the truth is I don't blame you. I blame me. I knew you were a cheater when I married you. I was one too. I cheated on a good man, and I will forever hate myself for doing that. But you, in your case, well, it's who you are. You can't help it." "Goodbye, Brandon," I said. Well, there it was. My life was over. And it was my own fault. Brandon was as responsible as I was. Logically, even more so. But in the end, it was my decision to screw over my husband Lucas, not Brandon's. Now, I was being made to pay the price. The degree to which this was brought home to me is the salient fact that I did not even make the effort to find myself a temporary place to stay before visiting Mark Hull, my lawyer. Sitting across from him now, I couldn't even bring myself to cry. Truly, I wasn't even actually sad. I was exasperated with myself. "Are you sure about this, Haley?" He said. "Yes, Mark, I'm sure. Brandon is just not capable of being faithful." I was certain he was. I was wrong. I need faithful, Mark. I really need faithful. "Hypocrite though that makes me," I said. I started to cry. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "I'll have him served. It'll take a couple of days." Anna will have some forms for you to sign before you leave, he said, nodding toward the outer office where his secretary was even then getting the paperwork together. Thank you, Mark. For all of your help, I said. Now, I had to find a place to stay. I could sack out at the hospital if I had to, but I didn't want to have to. I thought back 2 years to when Lucas had to do the same thing. I wondered where he'd stayed. Where had he sacked out? Where was he now? Well, I guess it didn't really matter. It was what it was now. I cried. Talk about someone screwing up her life. I had to be the poster child for that one. Melinda and I developed a new kind of relationship. She took on the role of an amateur psychologist, guiding me back into a goal-oriented mindset, while I played the part of a willing client, taking her advice seriously, and following her guidance. At that moment, we sat together, talking, both fully engaged in the conversation. Well, Lucas, she said with a sigh, you really need to pull yourself together. I nodded, absorbing her words. Melinda wasn't just someone to talk to. She was someone who challenged me, pushed me to think, and made me confront the things I was trying to avoid. I reflected on how things had unraveled. Haley had left Lucas for Brandon, and now she had left Brandon because of Brandon. Irony at its finest. There was no denying it. I had been selfish, and I had brought this on myself. If anyone deserved to be left, it was me. And as much as I wanted to take back my latest mistake, I knew I couldn't. I didn't blame Nurse Helen. This was on me. Entirely on me. But there was one thing I could still do. Without wasting another second, I headed for the records office. They had resources, and I needed answers. It took a day and a half, but he'd gotten it for me. Really? You're kidding me, I said. He's practicing in New Mexico? Well, I don't know about that. But he is licensed in New Mexico. That I do know, he said. Thanks a million, Frank. I owe you one, I said. I sat back and mulled the situation. The new situation. Where in New Mexico was he? Was he practicing medicine? Records didn't have that particular piece of gossip. He was a cardio specialist, though. It ought to be easy enough to find him. I thought. As it turned out, I was being naive. The ride down to Albuquerque took me 3 days. He has to be in Albuquerque, I thought. He was a cardio guy. Big city equals big bucks. He had to be there. No, Dr. Morgan doesn't work here. I know all of the cardiac specialists in the city, said the man in scrubs. Hell, I know most of the heart guys in the whole state. Thank you, Dr. Milford. I appreciate you checking for me, I said. The surgeon looked at his visitor. I just had a thought. You know, there was something in the papers about a week or so ago. Any reason your guy might be working at some out-of-the-way place? Said Dr. Milford. The man's eyes narrowed as though he just figured a reason for the high-pressure inquiry. Maybe, said Brandon. He hasn't committed any crimes, don't think that. But they're, well, marital problems. A divorce. Another man. Well, you know. Dr. Milford nodded. What about this newspaper thing? This article you mentioned? Said Brandon. It was out in Clayton. Maybe a couple 100 miles from here. Lot of history there and not much else. Anyway, seems some guy did a tracheotomy in some bar or other, said Dr. Milford. The papers said it was a professional job. But the really odd thing was that the guy, the one that did the trach, is a waiter at a small cafe there. The internet is wonderful. Not only did it archive almost every newspaper in the country, it also archived every issue of every newspaper. The article named the singer's savior, one Lucas Morgan, a waiter at the Lantry Cafe in downtown Clayton. The accompanying picture did not do the man justice, thought Brandon. A waiter? Lucas really was hurt by Haley when she dumped him. Had to be. Trying to forget. A waiter, for Christ's sake. The place was not quite a dump, but almost. Scratched and chipped tables. Faded desert orange paint on the walls. It did have one good-looking waitress. Name tag said Melinda. She smiled brightly, serving him coffee. The target didn't come on until 3. I looked up at the clock. Another 20 minutes. The broad-brimmed cowboy hat I bought that morning hid my face from anyone. I didn't want to see it until I was ready. I noticed him wiping his hands and talking to the waitress as he came on duty. She handed him something, slipped off her apron, and disappeared into the back area. Lucas picked up the full coffee pot and started serving the tables. Mine was last in line. I looked up. Our eyes met. What are you doing here, Brandon? He said. He didn't look shocked. But he also didn't look happy. Looking for you, I said. Well, I don't want to be found, he said. Not by you. Not ever by you. So pack up and roll, said Lucas. She dumped me, Lucas. She caught me with Nurse Helen. We're toast, I said. His snickers were expected. How funny, said Lucas. Yeah. Maybe. Lucas, she never got over you. She made a mistake because of me, and I know for a fact that she'd like to have that one back, I said. He looked at me long and walked off. I delivered my message. Message well delivered. I had to. One of the principals, at least. I couldn't tell by his reaction whether I'd done a good thing or just made things worse. Well, regardless, there was one final act to play out. That maybe would finally gain me a measure of redemption. I did what he said. I packed up and headed out. I figured the next stranger to have a seat at the Lantry Cafe would get a better reception than I'd had. I was pouring a final cup of coffee into the cup of Officer Rivas. Been doing the same thing at the same time of night ever since I'd been working at the Lantry. How's it going, Lucas? He said. Good, I guess, I said. How about you, Rivas? Good also. Mira and I got back together. She's about decided that the guy she traded me in for, Preston Williams, was, well, an asshole, he said and laughed. I laughed too. You say she's about decided? She's still not sure? I laughed. Well, she's pretty sure. I think the black eye he gave her for dancing too close to Clement Atkins kinda helped decide for her, he said. A black eye? Is good old Preston in jail? I said. Yeah. But he'll be out in the morning. His dad's got the bucks, said Rivas. I shook my head. I had come to love this little end-of-the-line town. I turned to go back to the kitchen and refill the pot and get a couple of orders that figured to be about ready. Turning, I almost knocked her down. I didn't knock her back a step. Neither of us said a word at first. We just stared. She looked tired, and she looked wonderful. I didn't smile. She did. But it was a weak attempt. Brandon, I said. Yes. He told me. And he told me he talked to you, said Haley. You look good, Haley. But you always do, I said. I left her standing there and headed back to the kitchen, where I had been going in the first place. I saw from the reflection in the mirror behind the counter that she had taken a seat in one of the booths. I put the pot back under the heater and watched it fill with the black elixir. I leaned back against the wall. I was tired, and I had to think. Melinda. Job. Haley. Career. Betrayal. Crushed ego. Pressures. Decisions. What did she want? And how would I react to whatever it was that she did want? Hell if I knew. I mean, really? Hell if I knew. It was midnight. My shift was over. I could go back in and talk to her. Or I could go out the back and head for my place. What do you want, Haley? You traded me in for someone you loved more. Here to tell me how wonderful it is now you're rid of me? I said. Lucas, you know damn well Brandon and I are quits. I know he told you when he came down here, she said. And why would you imagine that I believe anything that asshole said to me? I said. Or you either, if it comes to that. You're that bitter, Lucas? Did I do that to you? My God, I am so sorry. I can't tell you how awful I feel about what I've done to you. But Lucas, she spread her hands out to indicate the poverty of my current digs. You're one of the best heart guys in the country, Lucas Morgan. Kick my stinking ass out of here if you have to, Lucas. But get real and get back to saving lives like you were meant to do, she said. I stared at her and tried to think of something to say. I finally figured it out. To begin with, Haley, this place and the people in it, I mean the people I work with and the customers that come here, are real. I love this town. I love the people. I even love the job, hard as that may be for you to believe. As for my career choice, well, I do a little doctoring. Not as much as I used to, but it's important work and I do it grudgingly. I'm not interested in the role anymore, Haley. Not since I lost my, how shall I say it? My incentive. You know. My wife. My best friend. My self-respect. And, oh, I don't know, my life? I said. I just want to be as far away from the bad memories as I can get. But that begs the question, Haley, why are you here? Really? Surely not just to get me to go back to hospital work, I said. She looked down. I think she was about to cry. But she gathered herself. To get you back, Lucas. I blew it last time. I was crazy. I needed you and I didn't realize it. I didn't need Brandon. I wanted the excitement he brought to the table. He was good at sex, Lucas. Very good. And he was a good guy. Yes, I said. A good guy. And he was. At least for the most part. He wanted me, Lucas. But he never really loved me. Never really needed me. Only you ever did, Lucas. I just didn't see it then. I do now, she said. So to answer your question, I'm here to beg you to come back to me. To be my husband. To be my loving, caring, supportive husband, she said. Like I wasn't for you? Me. Back, I said. Me. Back? You're kidding, right? I didn't expect you to say yes right off, Lucas. But you asked me why I was here. I'm asking that you think about it. You know, kind of consider the possibility, she said. I slowly nodded. I don't know why I nodded, but I did. Yeah. I'll think about it, Haley. But the answer is probably going to be no. You killed me, us, when you told me you loved him more than you did me. You have no idea, I said. She started to cry. I just slowly shook my head. I'm sorry, Lucas. I knew I'd hurt you, but I had no idea how much. I really will never be able to forgive myself. I will be gone by morning, she said. And she was. And that left me alone again. To think. And make decisions. Never make decisions while under the influence of alcohol. I know what I'm talking about. Haley had been gone a week by the time I came out of the waking alcoholic coma I'd been in since she left. Truth told, I still loved the woman. I loved her more than my life. I guess I always knew that at some point I'd have to face up to that little reality. I'm not sure whether I was feeling good, happy about going back, or something else. Determined, maybe. What I did know for sure was that my mind hadn't been on my driving. So here I lay, my life intact, my physical being not so much. I was lucky, so they told me. Of course, their idea of lucky didn't exactly square with my idea of lucky. Oh yeah, I forgot. They were the doctors and nursing corps that put me back together after the accident. They say I'd hit the traffic divider at better than the allowable speed limit. Add to that little fact the truth that I wasn't wearing my seatbelt at the time. And, well, you get the picture. Actually, one of the nurses had later quipped that I must have been depending on the windshield to stop me from being catapulted too far up the road. If so, I had been right to do so. The windshield had stopped my forward progress quite successfully. What it had also done was tear my face to hell. Pretty damn thoroughly, too. At any rate, I now had more pins in me than a wedding dress in the making. Similarly, my entire head, my face was tightly wrapped in gauze, to prevent infection, and, I surmised, to keep me from being shocked by the sight of my countenance. I wanted to cry, couldn't. I was too sedated up. But I wanted to. Dr. Morgan, you have visitors, said Nurse June. God, Lucas, what have you done? Said Haley. I knew it was Haley. From her voice, of course. And because I still could see a little through the narrow slits in the bandaging. My voice was raspy. I knew. But I tried to answer her. Just in a hurry to get to you, I said. I'm not sure she picked up on the irony in my words. Oh my God, Lucas. I am so sorry. If any couple has ever been star-crossed, Lucas, it's us. We're due a break, Lucas. You and I. Oh boy, are we ever due, she said. I didn't say the obvious. That none of this would be happening if she and my best friend hadn't decided to screw me over. But, hell. That was water under the bridge, right? I decided to forgive. And forget. And get back together with her. Hadn't I? And yes, the thought had occurred to me. Would she still want the new and no doubt significantly less beautiful me that I was certain to be after all of the reconstructive surgery I was about to undergo? I hadn't been enough for her once. Would I be enough for her now? Well, we'd see about that, wouldn't we? She stayed with me that day. The whole day. She'd taken a room at one of the local bed and breakfasts at the edge of town. It was clearly her intention to take an active part in my rebuilding. What I didn't know then was just how big a part. 2 weeks later, a doctor wearing a surgical mask arrived to remove the bandages from my head. I had never been so scared in my life. I was a doctor. I knew exactly what I was in for. Careful, Doc, I said. I'm real sensitive about my good looks. I was trying to add a little levity to the moment. I could see by the doctor's eyes that he was not amused. But he said nothing as he began the delicate task of unwinding me. Now I was worried. Why didn't the man say anything? It took several minutes for the doctor to complete his task. He stepped back slightly, studying his work. His first words stopped me cold. I can do it, he said. Brandon, I blurted out. Too loudly. The very same, he replied, pulling his mask down and smiling. What? I started. I'm the best, Lucas, he said. So just sit back and let it flow. Okay? And he was the best. That much I couldn't deny. But the irony of it all, him, of all people, being the one to put me back together, was something I wasn't sure how to process. The man who had destroyed my marriage was now the one restoring my face. The same face my ex-wife once loved. Life had a twisted sense of humor. A movement at the doorway pulled me from my thoughts. "Hi, Lucas." "Hi, Brandon." "Hi," Haley said softly. "I called him to come down," she admitted, her voice hesitant. I just stared. "Do you realize how strange, how surreal this is?" She let out a breath, her confidence wavering. "Yes, but maybe it's also a way for us to reset things. To find some closure." I exhaled, shaking my head. "Maybe." The two of them shared a look, and I could tell she saw the doubt in my eyes. "We're not getting back together, Lucas," she clarified, her gaze steady. "I'm staying at a bed and breakfast, and Brandon will be here until we take you home." I nodded, letting it sink in. Months later, we returned to Seattle. My face, along with the rest of me, had been painstakingly rebuilt, thanks to Brandon's skill. 24 surgeries later, I had a new appreciation for plastic surgeons. Haley stayed by my side through the recovery, not out of love, but out of loyalty to what we had shared. When the final stitches healed, we both knew it was time to move on. Sitting across from each other at one of our old favorite restaurants, we raised our glasses in a quiet toast. "To finding our own paths," she said. "To fresh starts," I added. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, there was no tension between us, just understanding. Haley eventually moved to the coast to start a new life. I stayed in Seattle, focusing on my own journey. We kept in touch occasionally, but our story had come to its natural conclusion. As for Brandon, he left town as well, drawn to a certain waitress in Clayton. Word had it, he and Melinda got married not long after. I wished them well, though I had no interest in attending the wedding. Life didn't always wrap things up with a perfect bow. But this was enough. We were all where we were meant to be, separate, but at peace. Did Lucas make the right choice? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.